Ladies and gentlemen, Mars is a relatively small planet. Its average radius is only about 3,389 kilometers, equivalent to 53% of Earth's radius. However, the red planet remains the top choice for humanity's future home. One thing is certain: in the past, Mars had liquid water, an atmosphere containing oxygen for humans to breathe, and life may very well have existed on the planet. Recently, while exploring an ancient riverbed on Mars, NASA's Perseverance rover discovered peculiar white spots on a rock. This distinctive signature suggests the location may have once hosted bacterial life billions of years ago. So what is the truth behind this story? After all the efforts of searching, have we finally begun to detect traces of ancient life on Mars? Join us to uncover the truth. For the past several months, NASA's Perseverance rover has been journeying alone, ever since its companion, the Ingenuity helicopter, ceased operations in January 2024. The duo landed together in the Jezero crater on Mars on February 18, 2021, marking the first historic milestone of the Mars 2020 mission. From that point on, the name Perseverance, or its affectionate nickname Percy, became synonymous with groundbreaking discoveries. It has successfully produced oxygen from the thin Martian atmosphere, detected traces of water that once flowed in an ancient lake, found carbon molecules, and drilled and collected dozens of rock and soil samples in its persistent search for ancient life. The 1.8 kilograms miniature helicopter has become a reliable guide, successfully completing 71 flights and only ceasing operation on its 72nd mission when its rotor blades malfunctioned. Half a year had passed since Ingenuity ceased operations on that planet, yet the Perseverance exploration rover persevered, never abandoning its mission. The Mars 2020 expedition grew ever more determined in its hunt for evidence of living organisms. The area where Perseverance landed has been identified as an ancient lakebed, proving that water once flowed there in the past. Therefore, in the quest to find ancient life, the mission operators have directed the rover to focus its survey on rocks. The reason is that these rocks may have existed since the time Mars was water-rich and could potentially preserve fossils of life within them. On July 21, 2024, Perseverance crossed the northern valley of the Neretva River in Vallis. This was an ancient river valley, approximately 400 meters wide, which was formed long ago when the water flowed into the mouth of the Jezero volcano. This journey across the riverbed was ultimately rewarded when Perseverance discovered an extraordinary rock, perhaps the most significant stone of the mission thus far. It is very likely the first compelling evidence proving the existence of microbes from billions of years ago on the red planet. And this is that very rock. Dubbed the Chehava Falls, this rock possesses utterly unique and mysterious characteristics, completely unlike any rock ever discovered before. So what does this imply about its connection to life on Mars? First, observe the rock from the outside. In terms of size, the rock is 1 meter long, 0.6 meters wide, and has an arrowhead-like shape. The Perseverance rover has repeatedly scanned the rock using its TIRH and TIRL instruments. The results indicate it contains organic compounds, that is, carbon-based molecules. These are the fundamental building blocks of life. But what intrigued and perplexed scientists the most were the unusual light and dark spots on the rock. And when tracing the origin of these spots, they were utterly astonished to discover that this place was very likely once home to a living creature. As you can see, running along the length of the rock are white veins of calcium. Interspersed between these veins are bands of red material dotted with small, opaque white spots. This red color indicates the presence of hematite, one of the minerals responsible for the characteristic red color of Mars. Upon closer observation of the red areas, Perseverance discovered dozens of opaque white spots with irregular shapes, each merely a few millimeters in size. Each such spot was encircled by a layer of black material, looking exactly like the spots on a leopard's skin. Using the TIRX device for chemical analysis, Perseverance determined that these dark spots contain both iron and phosphates. According to David Flannery, a member of the Perseverance science team and an astrobiologist at the Queensland University of Technology, Australia, these spots truly represent a major unexpected discovery. On Earth, similar geological features are often thought to be related to fossils of bacteria that once lived underground. On Mars, these types of spots can form when a chemical reaction involving hematite occurs, causing the rock to change from red to white. These reactions can release iron and phosphorus, leading to the formation of black stains. These types of reactions could serve as an energy source for bacteria. Therefore, it is highly likely that this was once their habitat. Although the carbon building blocks on the spots are intriguing, suggesting the possibility that bacterial life may once have existed on Mars during a warmer, wetter period in the past. However, this is still insufficient to confirm the existence of microbial life on the red planet, and here are two reasons why. First, the building blocks of life are not only formed through the biological activity of microorganisms, but they can also be created through inorganic processes. Secondly, the formation of sunspots can occur in high-temperature environments, making it impossible for life to be sustained. To determine whether this rock truly contains evidence of the existence of bacteria, researchers need to bring the rock samples back to Earth to analyze them with modern, powerful laboratory equipment. And to achieve that goal, the mission operations team has ordered Percival to collect a sample from this particular rock. On July 23, 2024, the robot successfully collected a sample from a rock. The image below captures the moment the sample was carefully placed into a container by the robot. Not stopping there, Percival also took 2 selfies after collecting the samples. These photos were taken just as he had finished gathering the samples and was looking up at the sky. This selfie of the Perseverance rover was taken while it was intently examining a rock after completing its sample collection. The reason scientists created a mole robot is that it could very well become one of the breakthrough inventions in humanity's mission to explore Mars. The samples will be brought back to Earth by NASA in the future. However, it is unfortunate that they will not be able to return as early as the beginning of the next decade as planned. The reason is that the cost of the sample return mission has exceeded its budget. Initially, a plan to retrieve the samples, a collaboration between NASA and the European Space Agency, was drawn up under the name MESTER, an acronym for Mars Sample Return. The mission to return samples to Earth is expected to be completed in the early 2030s. NASA is responsible for building the lander, 2 helicopters, and the rocket to launch the samples from Mars. Meanwhile, the orbiter will be developed by the European Space Agency. According to the plan, Perseverance will autonomously collect the sample tubes and bring them back to the lander. Should the rover become inoperable, a pair of small helicopters will be deployed as replacements to carry out the task of retrieving the tubes and transporting them to the lander station. The sample will then be launched into orbit using a 2-stage rocket. The rocket's second stage will dock with an orbiter spacecraft built by the European Space Agency. This craft will then fire its engines and bring the sample back to Earth. According to the original plan, the sample was expected to return safely to Earth by 2033. However, as the mission is extremely complex, it has significantly exceeded its budget. Instead of the initial estimated cost of $5 billion and a launch date in 2026, the budget has now risen to $11 billion, and the sample return is projected to be delayed until 2040. This is a colossal sum of money, and the 2040 deadline is too far off. Consequently, in April 2024, the project was forced to halt. All personnel had their contracts terminated or were transferred to a new project. This means NASA must now seek an alternative solution, one that needs to be lean, efficient, yet still cautious enough to return samples from Mars, which could contain traces of life, back to Earth. Currently, NASA is calling for private space companies to bid, seeking a solution to bring precious samples from space back to Earth at the most optimal cost. While NASA is still struggling to find a solution to bring samples back from Mars, on the other side, China has set the goal of surpassing the US to become the first nation to achieve this. China's sample collection mission is named TIANWEN-3. According to the plan, in 2028, TIANWEN-3 will be launched into orbit in 2 separate phases using the Long March 5 rocket. The first launch will send up an orbiter along with a vehicle to return to Earth. The second launch will send a lander along with a vehicle to ascend from Mars. The duo is expected to land on the Red Planet in July 2029 or August 2030. When the lander touches down on the Martian surface, it will proceed to collect samples by scooping and drilling. Then, in October 2030, the ascent vehicle will launch from the top of the lander to rendezvous with the waiting orbiter. The vehicle will transfer the collected samples to the orbital module, in preparation for the journey back to Earth. These samples are expected to be brought back to Earth in July 2031. China's Tianwen-3 mission is currently progressing smoothly and has met all critical milestones as planned. If everything goes according to plan, China could overtake the United States to become the first country in the world to return samples from Mars to Earth. Let's wait and see which country will be the first to successfully collect a sample from Mars. With that, the TOT2V video would like to conclude here. Wishing you moments of relaxation and enrichment. And now, goodbye and see you all in the next videos. Wishing everyone good health, and I look forward to seeing you again.